we continue further with a company who is actually providing 1/3 of the global population with a connection to internet, delivering almost 30% of the global internet connection, internet coverage, internet connection actually. So John Dillon and from Akamai, give a warm welcome. He'll be here on the stage with me. John, welcome please. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing the stage. Well, a quick question, obviously, with that announcement, Akamai is a critical infrastructure. You're giving access to almost 1/3 of the world.
It's actually more. We'll get onto that.
Well, let's say up even more. But we were talking about, and I saw a hashtag, Not Afraid, which is an amazing hashtag for EMEA along together. So you 100% are part of this, of what is happening from, of course, from the good guys. Being critical infrastructure means that every terrorist attack is attacking such infrastructure, being connected, being able to share, being able to help. So what is your point of view, to start with that before you continue with your presentation?
Well again, it's kind of, it's a bit of a deja vu moment for Akamai. The company, really its foundation was around the last major terrorist incident. So when 9/11 happened, Akamai was an emerging startup business. And on that day, as happened a couple of days ago, everyone, as soon as they heard there'd been a terrorist incident in Paris, everyone, what did they do? They went to their computer or their phone and they tried to get to a news site to try and find out what had happened. And exactly the same happened on 9/11. So on 9/11, everybody was clamoring for information, what had happened. And all of those news sites just crashed. They hit the floor because they just couldn't cope with the volume of traffic. Interestingly, the only sites that were able to stay up were the ones that were on Akamai. And the Akamai staff that day had a manic day because we were getting inbound calls from the news services all wanting to get on the platform so that they could actually serve news on that day. So as in 9/11, we played a major role the last couple of days for those news sites, making sure that as people around the world were trying to find out what happened, they were able to get access to those sites.
Oh, what a good question.
So there you go. Good question to start with for me.
Here you are. This is for you. I'll leave you the stage.
Thank you very much. So welcome, everybody. This is the Innovation Summit, and so I am going to give you a presentation on innovation. Made me think a little bit about what innovation really is. It's something that we take for granted oftentimes. But hopefully, through this presentation, you'll get an understanding of what I believe, certainly, innovation is all about. And I'm going to put a premise, I'm going to make a suggestion to you all as to what I think is driving innovation today. So a little bit about Akamai first. As I mentioned, every day we're delivering around 15 to 30% of all web traffic. So everybody in this room has probably used Akamai today. If you visited your favorite social media site, if you've done any, looked at online shopping, if you've looked at any videos online, the chances are that Akamai has actually improved the quality of that experience for you. We've actually made the websites faster, we've made the video play better, we've made the transactions that you've been trying to do complete more successful, more quickly. We have around 200,000 servers deployed globally. Some of those here in Turkey as well, so we work with the service providers here in the region to actually deploy our servers as close as possible to the end user. So we try to be, well, we believe we're around reaching around 90% of the global population that's connected today. So, what is innovation? So I must admit, I had to look in the dictionary. I went to a dictionary and I thought, well, let's look and see what the dictionary said. And this is there were a number of different versions of this, but they pretty much said the same thing. It's taking an idea and translating it into something that results in a product or service that gives you value, gives value to the community, to the population at large. And there are two types of innovation. There are evolutionary, so this is somebody comes up with a big idea, and that big idea spawns many, many other ideas, many other products and services, possibly even industries, that come from that original idea. And then there's the revolutionary idea, which is the Big Bang. These are the big innovations, the big ideas that literally transform the way we live our lives. So the best way to illustrate these two different types of innovation is by looking back at history. So if you were to ask anybody, what is the what is the biggest or most significant innovation that they can think of, chances are this one will be right up there. This will be in the top 3 of answers, the wheel. So the wheel was invented, or was first, the earliest findings that historians have found around 3,500 BC was when we find wheels that were being made around that time frame. Interestingly, man had already figured out how to sail boats. We'd actually made some musical instruments and learned how to play musical instruments before we invented the wheel. So surprisingly, this came around a little bit late. But if you think about the wheel, that was the big invention, but it gave birth to a whole raft of other innovations. So it's pretty much the basis of all forms of transportation. Clocks and watches. Every clock or every watch has a wheel that's spinning around. We wouldn't be able to do it. We wouldn't be able to make clothes because we wouldn't be able to have the spinning wheel. Electric power generation. Early forms of electric power relied on a wheel or a mill that was spinning. Take steam power. Now, steam power was first experimented with or identified as a phenomenon in the 1st century. But it was many, many years later, in the 17th, 18th centuries, that we started to see steam power being used in industry. And the first steam engine was invented in around 1817, and that was the basis of the Industrial Revolution. So everything from agriculture, steam-powered ships that transformed immigration. So it used to take several months to travel to America on a sailboat, and your chances are you'd get killed on the way because of storms or whatever. With the steamships, that was a few weeks. And so immigration was transformed. It changed the way that we moved around the planet. So trains and cars, steamliners, jet engines. The basic principles of jet engines are founded on the principles of steam engines. And electric power generation. Still today, majority of our electric power is generated through steam. The light bulb. We were literally in the dark until around 1880 when Edison invented the light bulb. And following on from the ability to actually, it's hard to imagine a world without electricity, but once that was available and abundant, electronics and transistors coming around in the 20th century, which then led on to telecommunications and computers. So some significant transformations that came from that one spark, literally a spark in the case of electrical power, that resulted in many, many innovations. And finally, the telegraph. Now, a telegraph, the dictionary definition of the telegraph is to transmit something from one place to another without anything physical traveling. So the first telegraphs were optical. They were people standing on the top of hills with smoke signals or flashing lights at each other. Those were the first telegraphs. Then it went to electrical, and Morse code was introduced. And so then that gave birth to the ability to fax information and also the telephone. But then it went wireless, so ability to transmit using airwaves. And so the radio, television, cellular phones, the internet, and the email all are innovations that came from that one founding principle of the idea of transmitting information from one place to another without something physical having to be transported. So we've walked through history a little bit, and I'm going to pose this question, which is the question that I posed myself when putting this presentation together. What is the innovation spark of today? So what is driving innovation in this generation, amongst us in this room today? And I came up with something which I believe is the case, and I think it's a very, very simple idea, a very, very simple concept. And it's come about as a consequence of a number of other innovations in other areas. It's something that adds capability to existing products or services. So it's going to be something that can allow existing products or services to evolve, to have more value added to them. But it's also something that will allow us to imagine completely new products and new services that will transform our world. So it's something that actually we benefit from the very earliest point of creation. So when we're first conceived in our mother's inside their bodies, we have this connection which gives us everything that we need. It gives us all the nourishment, all of the information that we need as an embryo to develop into a baby. And I would argue that it's that connection that is actually driving innovation today. That if you take any product or service that exists today, And it could be a table, it could be a chair, it could be a car, it could be your toaster, it could be whatever item it is. You add a connection, so you add an internet connection, the ability to interact with it, with services elsewhere, and then you ideate. Ideate means you think about new ideas. What can you do? Now that we have that connection, what can this item actually do? And there are many, many examples of this happening in pretty much every industry across the world. So that's the first point. So it's allowing existing products and services to evolve, to add more value. And it's happening, as I said, across all industries. But it's also allowing us to think about completely new products and services. So the one that's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now is the driverless car. So imagine a driverless car. How could that possibly be possible? Connectivity is actually allowing that. And connectivity is the basis of everything. When you hear people talk about cloud, the cloud is servers, and servers are connected by those connections. If there are no connections, the servers would fall from the sky. So connectivity is really that innovation that is driving the ability for us to innovate in many, many other areas today. So examples of what this is actually happening. These are some real quotes taken from media over the past few years. So in 2004, the TV industry, so TVs, everyone thought, well, we've got to connect our TVs. Once one manufacturer started connecting their TVs, others followed suit. And they could charge, at that time, a $100 premium. Even though that connection wasn't really adding much value, they could charge a premium because people wanted to buy a connected product. Last year, an article in Forbes magazine, actually, they did some primary research, and it demonstrated that people were prepared to pay a premium for a product if it was connected. Even if it didn't necessarily explain what that connection would provide, they just felt that that was the right thing to do. And in many cases, there were features and functions that were being provided, albeit primitive in the early stages. And today, it's becoming increasingly difficult for manufacturers of products to introduce anything new that isn't connected. Think about this. Any product or service when you go to this department stores at the weekend, think about this. Pretty much anything and everything you're looking at that has electronics embedded within it is connected. I have an interesting premise that I'll also make, which is I think our life experiences as human beings, there's almost, the comment I would make is there's almost no experience that's worth having unless it's connected. There are some, obviously, more intimate and personal things that we'd rather do without being connected. But even when we're sleeping, we can now connect ourselves so that we can show our sleeping patterns. When we wake up in the morning, we can just see how well we slept, how much deep sleep we had versus restless sleep. So, the value of a connection. This is how most companies start, with the basics. They can, if they have a connection to their product, they can actually ship software updates. They can fix bugs. Maybe when it left the factory, there were bugs in the product. They can actually update the firmware. They can make it perform better. But then they can actually also add new features and functions. So if there's a connection to the device, they can maybe there are things they didn't think about that they can then ship at a later date. I have a connected alarm clock. And when I bought this thing, I always overslept because the snooze button was tiny. So when the alarm went off, I'd try to hit the snooze button, but because it was so small on the display, I often would just turn the alarm off. And they shipped an enhancement which allowed me to choose to make the whole screen a snooze button. So they added, or they enhanced a feature, and they were able to do that because the device was connected. And then finally, there is these transformative breakthroughs, coming up with new product ideas, things that we hadn't imagined before that we can now imagine. And this is very much a hotbed of innovation today. So, the needs and challenges, all of these uses, all of these use cases, all of this innovation, it poses some challenges for the underlying infrastructure. That's very much where Akamai plays. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we really make the internet work better for businesses. And these are where we see the challenges. So bandwidth. If you think about every single one of you, if you watch the latest James Bond movie, there's some scenes where the guy's wearing a contact lens, which is actually a video camera. And so every one of you could be wearing one of those right now. And you could be maybe showing this to your staff back in the office. So every one of you effectively would be a broadcast channel. You're broadcasting maybe an HD video, all 500,000 people in this room, to your offices. That places a significant challenge if a large proportion of the population start to do that. If all of you are connected, sending your fitness or your health vitality or your vitality or your vital statistics up to the cloud, again, these are bandwidth challenges that we'll certainly need to stay ahead of. Latency is a huge one. Talk about the driverless car. The driverless car is supposed to, when you're approaching an intersection, to make sure that the cars don't crash. If there's latency on the connection, that could be a serious problem. Anyone remember the Tom Cruise movie with the Minority Report, when he walks into a department or into a shopping mall and it's retinal scanning his eye and showing him promotions? Again, if that doesn't happen instantaneously, if he's walked past, by the time it's showing the advert, it's going to be showing the advert to someone else. So latency plays an increasingly important role, particularly in the medical industry, when connected devices are controlling people's heart or their pacemakers. So latency is key. Reliability. You can't, if you're monitoring someone's health conditions in real time, you can't afford to go offline for an hour. That could be a critical hour for that individual. So being available 7/24 every single day of every year is vital. And finally, as you heard from the previous presentation, security. There are already concerns that people that are wearing connected health devices are susceptible to hackers and prone to hackers and maybe being held to ransom. I'm going to blow up your heart unless you pay me some bitcoins. So it sounds far-fetched, but there are real concerns today that these sorts of things, a lot of these early first-generation innovations and products, they haven't really considered the security implications. So these are very much the 4 challenges that Akamai is focused on. We work with most of the major broadcasters around the world, airline companies, retail companies, to make sure that their services are delivered very, very reliably. They're delivered with security. A big focus of Akamai is around security, but that the performance is optimal, and that the people, their customers that are accessing these services get a great experience. So thank you very much. Hopefully that was a little bit of light relief, a little bit of entertainment for you. And I hope you agree with me. As I said, it's not something that I had really thought about until this presentation was put in front of me. But certainly I believe that the connection is the creative spark that's driving innovation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John.